Guruve Gaur Chanjaya Harikatha Dare Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatruvesha Kripa Sindhave Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Shri Gauri Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam devotees, Vaishnavis, Maharajas. So this is installment number 5. Definitely hope I got the count right for the Preaching in Africa series. And it is also the first day of Kartik Mas, Ujeshwari Shrimati Radhika's special month. So I had a very wonderful morning program and very nice meditation by hearing some of my Guru Pada Padma's Harikatha on the Lotus Feet of Shrimati Radhika. So very beautiful way to begin the day. Here where we are, the weather has begun to cool a little bit, and so the air is very fresh, and by the goodness of my wife, the atmosphere in the house is also very beautiful. She's been doing home improvements for some months now, and there's so many like wonderful and nice things in the atmosphere in the house. So feeling especially blessed this morning, and I thought that I would go ahead and continue the series. Now we left off speaking about the thrust of the preaching in Ghana. We've acquired the new building in Odoko, official town, and I've already described the palatial nature of the building, and I've also described how now we began to acquire many devotees as well, because we have been going out preaching regularly, and more devotees have joined, including, I mentioned, Shukadev and Srivats Prabhu, Ahimsa Prabhu, Ramanuja Prabhu. So one of the things that I've done throughout the series is call all of the devotees by their initiated names, with the exception pretty much of Bhakta Martin, because I was trying to stress the sort of evolution of meeting him in the very beginning. And of course, now he's Bhaktivedanta Shanta Maharaj. So his evolution is really something very, very amazing. So, but I've all called the devotees by their initiated names because I can't remember, for the most part, many of their secular names. And I thought it would be an apropos time for me now to also discuss how and by whom most of these devotees became initiated. So we have to remember that the period of time we're talking about now is 1981, 82. And the GBCs for Africa, West Africa, were, His Holiness Brahmananda Swami, who was sannyasi at that time, obviously, and of course His Holiness Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. Now, neither were initiating during that period. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj didn't begin to initiate till later on. It had to be around 86 or 87 perhaps, because I was in Zambia at that time when I got a letter from him and had found out that he was going to be doing initiations. And I remember I was studying Sanskrit at that time in Africa, in Zambia, and I wanted to get my first exercise in Sanskrit. So I wrote his pranam mantra. But Gaur Keshav Prabhu had beat me to the punch, so he had already written one when they had traveled to Tirupati. Pujapad Radhanath Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, Gaur Keshav Prabhu, and maybe some other devotees were there. But Gaur Keshav Prabhu had written a pranam mantra for him at that time, which is the one that is used now. So, but just to have been able to offer one, of course, my Sanskrit was just beginning, and I'm still don't have very much expertise, but The point I'm making here is that it wasn't until that period that Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was actually starting to give initiations. So there was a question, and I had been speaking to Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj both on the phone and by letter and so forth, and even when we were in Nigeria, when he came to visit, and the question was, well, who will give initiations in Africa? And I remember him saying that, well, you could reach out to various people. He kind of really had left that to myself, Brajalila, devotees there, to reach out to someone to do. So we wrote letters. He gave a few recommendations, so we wrote letters. We wrote one letter to, I think, Bhagavan Prabhu at that time. He was in France, but he had some portfolio in East Africa. And we wrote to a couple of other devotees who were at that time, in the role of giving initiation. So we received replies, and most of them actually, they were either too busy, and many did not have a direct interest really in taking up a new field or zone in West Africa. I think for one, many at that time did not see a great benefit in many ways for them to personally take responsibility for having to come there, obviously, and travel and make disciples and all that sort of thing. And also, they didn't consider that it was a very wealthy area where there, could be accumulation of funds, for assisting their preaching, whatever it might be. But anyway, long story short, we reached out to Kirtanananda. Now, myself and Brajalila, I think some other devotees who were involved with Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj at that time from Govinda's restaurant, many had taken initiation from Kirtanananda at that time. Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj had also accepted his sannyas from Kirtanananda, and therefore there was like, it seemed like a natural relation. Of course, we were always working with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj and saw him in the prominent position of our inspiration and like Shiksha Guru, etc. So, but because he was not initiating at the time, he had recommended. So we had taken, at that time from Kirtanananda, I told earlier that my first joining was actually in 1975 in New Dwarka. But I was in college at the time, and when I returned to go to college at that time, I had already written to Srila Prabhupada for initiation, but the devotee was telling me, Vice President of the temple at that time, that if I went back to school, then that would all be null and void. And I understood and accepted it, as I mentioned in the very first installment of this whole thing. So I did not have any major regrets. I had darshan of Srila Prabhupada on a number of occasions, and I felt that I was in the process. So that was satisfying, and I had direct association of Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj in a very intimate way, and so I wasn't feeling a void here. Now, my original point was that because of that relationship, because of that kind of connection, we wrote to Kirtanananda and asked, would he come to be the guru in West Africa? And of course, he replied that he would. And so at that point, we were preparing to get all of these devotees initiated. So two factors were going on. One was we were trying to increase and expand the preaching as much as we possibly could. And at the same time, we were doing preparation to make the temple, the best that it could be. Because we were going to invite Kirtanananda to come, and Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj had said that he was going to be coming. So, it was like a double-fold thing to really increase everything. Increase book distribution, increase the temple presentation, to increase the amount of devotees, everything. So we were in the thrust of doing that, and it was very successful. I already told the kirtan pastimes, and so we were just gathering a lot of devotees. Many of these devotees almost had a natural relationship with Krishna consciousness, obviously from previous samskars and so forth. Many of them are still practicing strongly today. So that was symptomatic that their sukriti from previous lives had been the thrust of their coming to bhakti. So I don't want to bypass this. This is one of the fun elements that happened at that time. I want to show one picture if I can. Hopefully, oh, there we go. So, again, I'm always reluctant looking at these things because it's a little hard to see. But if you take a look right here, you see that this is apparently a very beautiful beach location. Well, the reason I'm showing that picture is because at one point in our preaching, I was trying to find some way that, because the devotees worked extremely hard in every phase of everything regarding the preaching, they worked very hard. So I was trying to find a way to always increase the ability of devotees both to have new adventures and to be able to, you know, just create an atmosphere of being very peaceful and very happy in the execution of their service. So we had one Sunday program, and now we had enough devotees at the temple that what we would do is we'd get up and do our regular morning program, japa, walking class, everything else. And I spoke with Dr. Martin about trying to find some place, or either he recommended to me, I can't remember, it was one or two ways, he might have recommended to me actually, that there was a beach, and the beach was called Botiana. This picture I don't think was directly of Botiana, the beach that we were going to. It was kind of a private place. You actually had to go through one village to get there. And we decided we had enough devotees in the temple that we could take one half of the devotees and allow them to do all the preparation, which means maha cleanup, vegetable preparation, and the cooking for the Sunday feast. And we could take the other half of the devotees out to the beach at Botiana, and we would have more Harikatha and Kirtan there, and then allow the devotees to go swimming and just some R&R, so to speak. So the first time that we went to this place, we drove through one village. So while we were passing through that little village area en route to the beach, we got down in the village and did a Harinam and passed out some books and everything. And all of these, I especially remember so many children gathered around. And they immediately picked up, as was the case in many places we went, they immediately picked up the chanting of the mantra, and right in lockstep with our chanting, they began chanting. And so it was like really, really ecstatic. Many of the adults also participated. When we finished everything, the children told us to wait. So we were, loading up in the cars and everything to continue. It was a very short distance to the beach from there. So they told us to wait, however. And what they did, and this became a routine every Sunday, what they did was they climbed up the trees and brought down fresh coconuts, just like in India you have dabs, the fresh coconut. So they climbed the trees and brought down fresh coconuts for us and gave everybody fresh coconuts. So it was like, oh, this was the first symptom of how beautiful the day was going to be. Weather was perfect, everything else. So we drove out and went on to Botiana Beach. We did Kirtan a little more. And then we did some Harikatha. And then, of course, afterwards, we let the devotees split into two sections. We had the ladies go down the beach in one direction and men in the other direction, and allowed everybody to go swimming and so forth. The water was very beautiful, very calm. I'll tell a story a little bit later about an experience I had where I almost drowned practically because I did make a good assessment. Every beach in Africa was not the same. So everything was like really, really, really beautiful in that sense. I remember, I'll tell one other pastime, which happened a little bit earlier. Before we discovered Botiana Beach, we had used to go and, like I said, preach at the Hindu temple in Osu. And not far from Osu, there's another beach. I think that's Labadi. The other beach that's out that way is called Labadi Beach. And at that time, we found a section that wasn't so crowded sometimes. And we, I think, went out, this is earlier on, we went out to go swimming there one weekend. I can't remember, Saturday or Sunday. But at any rate, I do remember, and I probably gonna have to tell a backstory on this, which I really wish I'd find out more about from Pujapat Shanta Maharaj. But I remember Gyanadas being there. I think the other devotees, which were the earlier devotees, had gone. You know, no, maybe some of them had stayed back actually, and it wasn't just for preparation of Sunday program, but other things. And so we were with a pretty small contingent. I know Dr. Martin was there, myself, Brajalila, Gifty, and there was one lady, she was like, you know, a lady, I'll say one lady, who was a European girl. Now, backstory here, this girl, which, you know, I found out that there were quite a few people from Europe who had done this, had come across by land through the desert to Africa. So apparently there's some route that you can go from Europe, and I guess you come through North Africa, come around, come through the desert, and come on down into West Africa. So she had done this by herself, hitchhiking. So I was like, you know, I was amazed. I cannot remember her name. I'm going to call Pujapat Shanta Maharaj and get her name, and maybe in the next segment give more of a history. But anyway, she had come completely from Europe, from England, all the way. Was she from UK? Anyway, she came from Europe and had come all the way down through North Africa, as I mentioned, down through the desert and everything. Had gone through pretty horrific situations there, including being molested and everything else while she was traveling. And anyway, she arrived in Ghana. She had come to the temple, and she knew something about Krishna consciousness from Europe. And she began staying in the temple and practicing. So anyways, at this particular occasion, we had gone out to the beach at Labadi, and we had all started going swimming. So I remember, you know, as usual, we had the ladies go down a little bit, and the men were standing here. I was still standing on the beach, and I was talking to Dr. Martin and Gifty, who was a young girl. She was no more than maybe 12 or something at that time, if that old, along with Brajalila and the European lady that I mentioned, I will find out her name. They had already gone in the water. So there are water tables. Water tables are like if you go out and you walk a little ways on the sand, the water will be a certain level, like maybe up to your waist. But you can, if you walk out a little bit further, there's like a sudden drop where the water goes over your head immediately. So we were standing on the beach talking, and all of a sudden, you know, we heard kind of screaming and struggling. And so, of course, we looked over and saw that Brajalila, because Gifty was on Brajalila's back. I guess they were in the water, and Gifty had got on Brajalila's back, and they were walking. And suddenly, she must have hit one of those water tables and gone under. And, you know, Brajalila can swim, but Gifty could not. So I guess in a panic, Gifty was holding on so tightly that now Brajalila's struggling also. So we're running, myself and Dr. Martin, towards the water. But as we're running towards the water, we noticed the devotee I'm talking about, the European lady I'm talking about, she had swam pretty far out. She must have been an excellent swimmer because she had swam pretty far out. But she apparently heard what was going on, and she swam back towards them, ended up saving both of them. She grabbed Gifty off of Brajalila and was able to control her and, you know, get back to where they could get their footing. And Brajalila obviously was able to then swim, you know, being freed from, you know, the panic of the young girl, Gifty. And so, you know, we realized now anytime we went to a beach that we had to be a little bit careful as well. And I'll tell a story that happened to me in Togo as well. I'll maybe tell that in another section when I speak about that trip to Togo. But we were going every Sunday pleasantly to Botiana Beach, and we would do this kirtan. We'd have a little prasad that we would take, not much because we had taken breakfast, so we'd just take some kind of snack because we'd stay there pretty much through the whole day. So we'd had the coconuts that the kids would give us, the little snacks we had, and then we had to be back to the temple by about 3 o'clock because we start our Sunday program at 4 or 4:30. So we had to get back. Devotees had to be able to shower, change, and help out with any remaining things to be done and get ready for the Sunday program. So we used to alternate. On one Sunday, we would take one half of the devotees. That following Sunday, the half that didn't go last week, they would go. And every Sunday it'd be the same thing. We'd stop in a small village, have kirtan. The kids would get coconuts. Then we'd go out to the beach, have some Harikatha, kirtan more, and then split up into male and females and enjoy the beauty of swimming there at Botiana. So, as I mentioned also, we were, even while doing this, in a very intense marathon spirit to get everything arranged for the coming of Kirtanananda and, of course, Srila Bhaktitirtha Maharaj. Now, I thought maybe in the beginning they were going to be coming together, but as it turns out, that wasn't going to happen. Srila Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he had some other things that had to be done. So Kirtanananda ended up coming, like I said, let me back up just a little bit. Before he came, we had thought we have to get a Vyasa-san, we have to get all of these things. And I think I told the story a little earlier of how we had completely decorated the temple. Everything was painted, everything was beautiful. The whole building was new anyway, so it wasn't so much to do. We did all the landscaping and made everything very beautiful. But the only issue that we had now is we really didn't have Vyasa-sans. So there was a couple of ideas, and I remember we went and talked to Guy Fitz. And Guy Fitz, I spoke a little bit about him in the last segment of our presentation. And he was an artist, so we were asking, well, what is your suggestions? And he told us about a carpenter. So we went to this carpenter, and I think Guy Fitz maybe had even drawn what we wanted, and we added all the little nuances, like we wanted lions on the handles, and we wanted it to be, so high, and this is the color fabric we wanted to use. So we gave all those details to the carpenter, and what he created from what we gave him was absolutely astounding. I mean, really amazing. This was hand carved, and it was pretty heavy. He carved it out of, very high quality wood, and all the details we asked for in terms of, engraving and decoration, all of those things were there. So we got one for Srila Prabhupada, where we put Srila Prabhupada's picture, and then one for, the visiting sannyasis and guru. So we had got those in the temple, and I remember the whole time that we had done our development in Ghana, from Alaja ongoing, we really had not, except for going to Osu preaching from time to time doing kirtan, we had not really reached out to the Indian community. And therefore, all of the development in Ghana was essentially local development. All of the devotees were local devotees, and that was a big thing because a lot of the preaching that went on in Kenya and in East Africa had a focus of the Indian community, and then it kind of built up and gradually some local devotees came. But Srila Bhaktitirtha Maharaj and Ramananda Prabhu both told me the story of how Srila Prabhupada, when he went to visit Kenya, he mentioned that he wasn't as happy just to have a temple for the Indian community, because the Indian community, just out of natural resource from cultural background, everything else, they'll find a way, just like the temple in Osu, etc. in Ghana, they'll find a way to make a temple and have worship. Srila Prabhupada really wanted that the local inhabitants of these places in Africa would come to Mahaprabhu's movement. This was really his desire. So in West Africa, in Ghana especially, this was the first time perhaps that the entire thrust of the movement was developed on the preaching to the local community. And all of the funds, all of these different things were resourced from the local community. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because I remember after we got the Vyasa-sans, we were about to open, there was a expat family, and again, I can't remember exactly the name. I do remember they were from North India. They had moved in not so far from the temple, right? And I remember meeting them and inviting them to come because we had Guru coming and so forth and so on. And that family started to come pretty regularly and so forth and so on. They were maybe one of two Indian families who were actually coming at that point. So anyway, now that everything was set up and Kirtanananda Maharaj was going to be coming, we were extremely happy. We had everything set. So his arrival date was set, and we prepared and everything. And when he came with one other devotee, Nityo Dida Prabhu. And to this very day, myself and Nityo Dida Prabhu have a very nice and wonderful friendship. He's always been encouraging me. He's a senior to me, obviously. And he's always been super encouraging to me and very lighthearted, and even though he's, somewhat senior, he's always made me feel very, very nice and very comfortable. In fact, in my traveling and preaching, which every year, of course, we haven't done it this, because of the COVID and all of that, we haven't gone out this year. Our preaching this year was geared to go to Hawaii, but every year, myself and my wife, we take 2 traveling trips a year. One trip sometimes I'll do with the men. There's a whole group of men. Myself, Bhumipati, Shamasundar, Sanatan sometimes, Sahadev Prabhu. We all travel together. Shanta Maharaj, Madan Mohan. So as a group of men, we all travel together. That's one thing. And then myself and my wife, we always travel every year for preaching as well. So in 2020, we also did travel before all of the COVID thing became so heavy. And our traveling was to New England. So we did preaching in, first we started in New Vrindavan. That was our very first stop on our preaching trip. And the reason that I began speaking about the glories of Nitya Dida Prabhu is because for the last couple of years, when I do preaching and I am stopping in New Vrindavan, he's hosted the programs at his house, and they've been absolutely amazing. I mean, on both of the last 2 preaching trips, and I'll stop in New Vrindavan, it's been like one of the highlights of the entire preaching. I meet so many older senior devotees of Srila Prabhupada, and so many new devotees. And of course, being in New Vrindavan is wonderful. I mean, every time we've gone there, it's been more and more improvements, and we have many old friends there as well. But Nitya Dida Prabhu especially, I'm always very thankful because he really, I'm thinking back way that far back, was very encouraging. And then right up until now, he still encourages me by inviting me to do preaching programs and things like that. So he came with Kirtanananda, and factually speaking, did all the legwork and all the pragmatics for arranging for the initiation of all of these devotees, who were quite a few at that time. So Kirtanananda was very happy, and Nitya Dida Prabhu was very surprised and happy at just how much, preaching and everything had gone on, and how many devotees were there and so forth. So it was a really ecstatic traveling and preaching for him. They had stopped in Nigeria as well and had given initiation there, and now they were in Ghana and they were giving initiation. So now all these devotees had been initiated, and it was really wonderful for them for the first time to have the experience of being able to directly serve Guru and et cetera, et cetera. So just very wonderful time for the devotees then. Now, after that happened, all devotees were initiated. And in fact, this is another thing. In fact, there were some devotees like Bhakta Martin, I believe Gopal, who had been around for quite some time. So some of those devotees, we recommended that they receive both Harinam and Diksha at the same time, because they had been around for quite a while. And the availability of Kirtanananda to travel to Africa on a regular basis and everything, we weren't sure how that was going to be. So we recommended those devotees for Harinam and Diksha. So I think Gopal, Bhakta Mahaprabhu then became Mahamantra. They all took both Harinam and Diksha, and some devotees, they just took Harinam. So I remember afterwards, one thing that happened, I'll tell this also, because it was something that was a great teaching moment, both for myself and for the devotees as well, because I got pretty heavy about it. I remember I left with Mahamantra now at that time to go traveling and preaching, because we were starting to spread out and go to other places. In fact, after Gopal had taken initiation, and I think by that time also a couple of marriages were arranged. I think Ganadas and Theravali, Gopal had become married. We started to send devotees out to open temples in other places. So I remember Gopal and his wife and a couple of other devotees went to Nkoko. And they had a farm there, and they began to open a temple and preach there. We had sent devotees up to Kumasi, and devotees were kind of preaching there. But I had traveled for preaching with Dr. Martin, I believe. I can't remember exactly where we went, but we went someplace for preaching. And when we came back, I mentioned how upstairs in the temple is where the men were staying, and we had like 3 or 4 rooms up there. And, you know, they kind of, everybody would stay together, you know, so to speak. They had always given me a room in that room on the front, but, you know, I told my mouth story. But generally, I went back into that room at some point. But anyway, I came back, and the other rooms that were there had signs on them. And I came upstairs, I was getting ready to go in my room, and I looked at the signs, and I thought at first the sign said like brahmachari. So I thought it was like brahmachari ashram, you know, because by that time we had a couple of men who were married as well. So I thought maybe it was like brahmacharis and they were going to have grihastha men here. But the sign just said Brahmins, right? So I was like, well, what is this? So I called a few of the devotees in and I asked, you know, what is this? So they said, well, we have one room for the Brahmins. So that was those devotees who took Diksha as well as Harinam. And they were having another room for the devotees who had just taken Harinam or weren't initiated. So I got a little bit heavy, snatched the sign off the door and said, you know, and gave a little bit of a teaching moment here that, you know, we're not running some kind of caste system here or something like that. I forgot what I said, but I think it was pretty heavy. And the intention was to teach the devotees that dasatwa, or being das, is the essential characteristic of being Vaishnava. Right? There is no upadi in Vaishnavism. I'm Brahmin, I'm Kshatriya, I'm Vaishya, I'm Sudra, etc., etc. Right? Varnashram Dharma, I'm not giving Harikatha class here, so I don't want to detract so much from the stories about the preaching. But here it was apropos to teach the devotees that Vaishnavism is not based on upadis. Vaishnavism is based on your advancement in bhakti, and that your advancement in bhakti is symptomized by Trinadapi Sunichena, how you've become humble. There's one verse actually in Great Bhagavatamrita, I believe it is. Paripokena dhanasya Krishna premaja samvitanyate parasparam apiyetan karyam ikshate. That dainya bhava, humility, is the result of becoming Krishna conscious. Actually, humility nourishes Krishna consciousness, and Krishna consciousness nourishes humility. Then it goes on to say, Sanatana Goswami Prabhupada goes on to say, actually, karya mikshate. No, actually, not only does one nourish the other, but one is the cause of the other. So anyway, you know, I just gave a very solid lesson to devotees in staying humble, right? Staying humble and staying in the spirit of growing in bhakti. Do not start to create status elements by who's initiated, who's not initiated, who's Brahman, who's not. There should be a natural humility that's present. And in that natural humility and in that natural environment, older devotees will be seen by their qualities and by their knowledge in bhakti, etc., etc. So anyway, so that was the first of sometime corrective things that had to be done to make sure that we were moving forward. So the next thing was that we were now getting prepared because Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was coming. So now we had the devotees, they were initiated, and now Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was going to be coming, so there was a whole nother thrust of energy, of preparation and getting everything ready. And so devotees were extremely happy. So we got word when Maharaj would arrive, and everybody got all prepared and we were waiting, and then suddenly we got a message, well, there was a delay, there was a problem, and that Maharaj wasn't going to come at that time, but he had scheduled it for 2 weeks later. Now, up to that point, we could go to the market, we could go to the brown bread place I talked about, we could go to the yogurt factory, we were going, you know, anywhere we wanted, and we could acquire all these wonderful things and prepare all these wonderful dishes. So we were really, really excited that now that Maharaj was coming, we'd be able to cook for him and do so many things. As I mentioned in my very first presentation, Maharaj, of course, at that time he would only eat dried fruits and nuts. But since that time, I think both for health reasons and because he was just around so many devotees who saw him, though he wasn't initiating at that time, saw him as guru, wanted to render some service, and cooking is a wonderful service to render. So I think Maharaj acquiesced and began to take cooked food more and everything else. So devotees were super excited to be able to now cook for Maharaj, and I was super excited because in Ghana especially, I told you how good the food was. So I was anxious for Maharaj to come and then have the devotees cook all these special things. Well, lo and behold, there was some kind of crisis that happened. I think there was a shortage of gas or something like that. And as a result of the shortage of gas, the trucks could not get from the farms to the city. Therefore, a shortage in the market took place, and it was really severe. So I remember writing to Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, and I didn't get a response when I wrote, so in panic I went downtown and we actually called to ask Maharaj, not to come, at that time. There was this whole kind of crisis thing going on with the gas and all of that. And I'm going to tell another story because I think the two are related. So Maharaj, he said, okay, I'll consider, I'll think about coming at another time, right? Oh, the backstory will make this all make sense. Why there was a shortage of gas, what was going on. When we heard that Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was coming, we wanted to make a courtesy call on the president. I told you about this devotee, Lakshmi Pati, and because we've been doing a lot of preaching, then we had met some other, government officials and so forth. So we had found a way to meet the president. Liman was the president at that time in Ghana. And we found a way to meet him, and we were going to tell him Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was coming, and he agreed to meet with us to set up a meeting for when Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj came. So this was a huge thrust in the excitement of our waiting for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj to come, because now we were going to be making a courtesy call on the president, and then all these other factors. This would be the first time Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was seeing the temple as it had been developed and all these devotees. So we went to the government place to meet the president and to set everything up and to explain our programs. We had brochures and explaining everything we did. So we are sitting in the waiting area, our turn to go in to see the president. So all of a sudden outside, I'm hearing like what I know from growing up in the city is gunshots going off, right? So I'm hearing like gunshots going off, but they're at a distance, right? And I see there's like slight movement within the complex there, some people moving around, there's some military people kind of going in and out of rooms and different things like that. But I'm not really focusing on that. I'm just, sitting there. And finally, because it's kind of continual, I'd asked, my mantra, hey, Prabhuji, can you check, see kind of what's going on? So he got up and he, I think, asked a few people, and the people were being a little dismissive, the people working in the complex as well as the, whatever military personnel were there. So he went outside and he heard the gunshots. You could hear them a little bit louder, from outside. So he heard that. And then he came back in and he said, well, I did not see anything. I can't really know, what's happening. So a very short time later, a whole military kind of contingent comes into the place we are and starts ordering everybody around. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And then he looks at us, and obviously we're there in Dodi's, Kirta's, Tilak, and it's like, who are you and what are you doing here? So then we start explaining. They hear, obviously the accents and know we're Americans and, where's your passport and so forth, so on. And I remember having to surrender our passports and this and that. And then they told us to leave, right? So we were like, okay, we're not exactly sure at this point. I knew something was amiss, but I wasn't exactly sure what. And now I'm really a little bit not feeling it because now they've got myself and Brother Leela, they got our passports, right? So we get back in the van, and I'm telling him, well, turn on a news channel or something so we can find out what's going on. So my mantra Prabhu, Bhakta Martin, who's now become my mantra Prabhu, he turns the radio on, and on the state radio station, the country radio station, there's nothing but like marching music or military music. So he cuts it off and he tells me there's a coup. That's what's going on. This means whenever you turn the radio on, you hear this kind of, means they've taken over the radio station. And, from what we saw, he knew that a coup had taken place. So this was the coup that took place with Rawlings when he threw a coup and took over from Liman. So we happened to be in the office or in the presidential complex at that time. So now I'm like a little panicked. My passport's gone. We're heading back to the temple. We're not sure what we're going to encounter along the way. We're not even sure what the full extent of having a coup means. I knew what a coup is, but what's the full extent of it going to be here? So we get back and we, round all the devotees up. We tell everybody what's happening. Also, they told myself and Brother Leela that tomorrow, which meant the following day, that we should come to the sporting arena, right? I think it's called Black Star Arena. I can't remember, but it was a huge, like where they have soccer matches and everything, that we should come there and we could retrieve our passports after interview from there, right? So now we're all, kind of, upset and everything. Then it kicks in that I'm thinking Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj is planning to come, and, even though he's delayed his trip for 2 weeks, that with this going on, I'm not sure what's happening. So I'm writing to him not to come at all because I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure what the outcomes are. Rather, me and Brother Leela even may have to leave. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. So that next day, we get up and, my mantra and another devotee, we have another devotee there, but I can't remember his name, but we had several devotees by the time, Guru Das, and others. I think even Harikatha Muni, who was another American devotee, he was there at that time. He had started a Gurukul. So we actually had a whole bunch of young kids who were now in our Gurukul. So we had a really thriving temple there. I kind of bypassed that story, but Harikatha Muni was pretty nice too, because he came and he was able to create that Gurukul, and himself and Guru Das, they kind of ran the Gurukul, and Harikatha Muni was training some of the brahmacharis, how to be brahmachari and all of that. So anyway, we get up the next day, me and Brother Leela, along with, I think it was Shankara Prabhu and Amma Mantra, and we go down and we go to get our passports back. Long story short, there's long lines, so we find out where we're supposed to be. We get on the line, they go down, they interview us. What are you doing here? What is your work here? Etc., etc. Blah, 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 right? So we go through all of that. They finally give us back our passports. And we're like, okay, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen in days to come. Will they come and tell us that we can't be here anymore or what? And by the way, prior to going, we knew something was a little bit amiss too, because prior to going to make that appointment, wow, so many backstories are coming right now. I think prior to going to make that appointment with Liman, we had Mangalarti one morning, and at the end of Mangalarti, of course, we do the Narsingha prayers. So right at the end of the Narsingha prayers, right, Brother Leela was standing in the back of the temple room under the window ledge, and on the top of the window ledge is where we had a nice sizable picture of Narsingha Dev. Well, anyway, that picture at the end of the kirtan, and we had solid floors, so it wasn't like when we would dance or jump, it would create vibration. But somehow that picture fell off the top and hit Brother Leela in the head. So it caused a little, scarring and everything there. So after we had taken care of that, we decided, oh, I know what, we had an appointment at the U.S. Embassy, right? This is so, because if we were going to meet with the president of a country, a lot of times the U.S. Embassy will call you in and they will give you a briefing on U.S. policy if you're a U.S. citizen right, and your missionary group, whatever it is, they give you an insight into what U.S. policy is in relation to that country, right? So you don't go in and certain things are said and all of that. This was my first time experiencing that. But on our way to the embassy, right, we're in the van. Roger Leela just got hit with this Narasimha picture, so there's a lot of strange elements in the atmosphere. But in the van, we're going down. There are these huge crowds, and they're like really in kind of a riotous thing, and they're all going towards the embassy, right? So I remember Mahendra Prabhu telling us, well, just lay down in the back of the van, because I guess he kind of understood something was going on with protests in the American embassy, whatever. So we did that. We laid down in the back of the van. We got to the embassy, did that whole thing, came out. And then it was the next day or 2 days that we went to the presidential grounds and into the presidential facilities, and this whole coup thing happened, right? So now we're telling Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, not to come at all, etc., etc. And now some time has passed, Rawlings has taken over, but now I guess the result from that, if my whole chronology is correct, the result was from that there became some disruption in the gas supply chains and whatever, and the trucks couldn't get in, so that led to this whole inability to get like food and all the kind of things we were used to having. So I remember at least for maybe 2 weeks or more, we had been communicating Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj not to come. And at that time, prasadam in the temple consisted of ground nuts, bananas, and oranges. That was it. Ground nuts, peanuts, bananas, and oranges. That was the thrust of the prasadam that we had at that time. The yogurt factory thing was shut down. The family where we used to buy the brown bread, I think they were not really selling per se, but I do remember that we had requested them to make us a number of loaves because we wanted them to put it on the side for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So then we canceled that order, and then we went back when we thought he was coming, before all this coup and all this happened, to as well put some aside. So, at any rate, we didn't hear back from Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. So I was thinking, and the devotees were thinking, we would not stop what we would normally do. Now, we were going downtown doing book distribution things because we didn't see a reason to stop. Some days had passed since that whole incident, and we felt we'd go on doing what we were doing. So we went out and we were preaching, and I remember one night we came back to the temple, and I think I'm going to conclude with this because I think I'm running probably over my hour. We came back to the temple, and that night we went ahead and did Harinam as we normally would do. So after Sundar Arati, we gathered outside, as I mentioned, we got our torches, we went out, and that night the Harinam was ecstatic, super ecstatic. Like I said, the markets would shut down, people grabbed the torches, we went around, and we kind of, I guess with all going on, we elongated the Harinam. So we went all the way down as we normally did, came back around, and now there was a a massive crowd of people, and we went inside the gates of the temple, and as I mentioned, we went up onto the veranda, the little balcony area underneath, where we would get that echo, which would, raise the volume of the kirtan, and we just had a rip-roaring kirtan. I mean, it was we just didn't stop. We were just continuing, and the crowd was continuing. And finally, we, as we would do, we were closing out with the Narasimha prayers. So then we were, finishing the Narasimha prayers. Jaya Narasimha Dev, Jaya Narasimha Dev, Narasimha Dev, Jaya Narasimha Dev, Jaya Bhakta Prahalad. And we were chanting, right? All of a sudden, the crowd, they started moving because there was a car coming. And, normally there would be so many people standing outside the gate and everything. It was a little difficult for traffic, so generally around that time just wouldn't be that much traffic passing back and forth in front of the temple, but the car was blowing its horn, right? And so we were thinking, well, hopefully, this is not an issue or something's going on, or it's the police maybe even. So anyway, we continued with our chanting, But I thought, not understanding clearly what's going on, right, we should, go ahead and end. So, we ended the kirtan, and I started the Jayadwani. And as I started the Jayadwani, the car pulled in front of the gate of the temple, and Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj gets out. Now, he didn't let us know he was coming, because we had written to him not to come because of all the things going on. But he got out of the cab, and he walks in, and as he walks in, all the devotees jump up, and they start again, Jaya Narasimha Dev. Then they started, chanting Jaya Prabhupada. And then Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, everybody knows, how he danced and everything else. So, as, we rushed devotees out to grab his bags and everything, right? He starts the kirtan right in the courtyard section there, and he's dancing and everything. And so now the kirtan takes off again, and it's like another 35 something minutes. There's a rip-roaring kirtan again, right? And then, finally, the kirtan ends and everything. And now everybody, all the people had never seen Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj before. The people like that, villages in the secular community and everything which is around the temple. So they knew something very special was going on. This person was something very special. So they all stayed gathered there. And Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he made everybody raise their hands and, chant, Hare Krishna, then Hare Bol, everything. Then he came inside and, everything shut down kind of for the night. But, I sat, myself, Mahamantra, I think Raja Leela, we sat, talked to Maharaj, and, we were very surprised that he came because of everything going on and the fact that we had not had communication, and the last communication was, don't come because of everything going on. So anyway, he's, I guess in his mind, in his heart, he was feeling that, he wasn't sure what the devotees were going through. So he wasn't looking forward to coming at the best times. He was looking to come at the time he thought devotees may be in need. So that was a very, very special thing. Very, very special. Because we didn't have hardly anything to offer at that time. And I'm going to end, I kept saying I'm going to end, but I'm going to end with this last part. I remember that next day I was in complete anxiety because, like I said, we were eating bananas, oranges, and groundnuts. That was our meal. And we arranged somehow to get a little bit of oatmeal. And we served Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj that next morning oatmeal. And I remember having devotees, Mahamantra led them, to go out and see what else they could find. And he was able to get to the brown bread place, and that family made for us, because we told them we had a special guest, they made for us fresh brown bread. So, they came back with the bread and everything, and now I'm like, okay, I have some little bit of ecstatic mood in my heart because I know I'm going to be able to, offer Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, Raja Leela the same, all of us feeling the same. We'd be able to offer something, right? That was a little nice. So we made some butter and we sliced the bread and everything, and we had that to offer him as well. So Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he came, and when he had his plate, and then we got the bread and everything, and he had the bread on the plate, he said, oh great, devotees are baking bread. So we had to tell him, Maharaj, no, we get this bread from this place. It's from a family, one expatriate person, and another Ghanaian lady, I think it was. And so he says, oh, well, this is not so bad, because we were really upset that we could only offer fruit, basically, and a little oatmeal or something. And he said, well, at least the devotees have bread. So, then I told Maharaj, no, this is like, we just got this especially for you being here, because, there is none. There wasn't any flour and everything, so they can't make bread for all the devotees. So then Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he said, oh, it's okay. And he took the bread off his plate. And gave it to some of the devotees. And then he mentioned, I don't eat a lot of, cook food and stuff like that anyway. So he only took the fruit and everything, and he gave the devotees the bread. So it was just, pretty far out things. So, I don't know what kind of note this is to end on, but just thinking back to that time, it's just pretty amazing. Just pretty amazing stuff. So, very fond memory also of Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj for me now, so a little emotional. But I think we'll end here for the day because I know I've gone over my hour for sure now, that I know. All right, Dandavat, Pranam, devotees, all glories to Srila Gurudev, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, all glories to the preaching of so many devotees there in Africa. Jai Shri Radhe, Radhe Radhe.